How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to CinemAttack. As some of you may recall, I am at least one-third of the show, and I've been away for a while, but now I'm back and making my return. Kinda. I mean, the show really isn't making its return with this episode. I know I'm using a lot of quotes, but bear with me. This episode isn't officially the return of CinemAttack for Season 2. This is just practice. Sorta, for us to get back into the routine of reviewing movies. We're gonna be back in approximately 2 weeks with the regular show, with reviewing the film Rush, directed by Ron Howard. Looks to be a pretty interesting movie, and I'm looking forward to it. However, today's episode is going to be a bit different. As many of you know, we took a break for the month of August, simply because our personal schedules weren't really lining up, they were pretty packed, and also because we felt like we needed a break from the show. But we still went to the cinema, and we still saw plenty of movies. But today, we're going to be reviewing 3 movies that came out in August to kind of catch up on the summer movie season. Yours truly will be handling Kick-Ass 2, Sean will be talking about Jobs, and Max will be looking at Elysium. It's definitely going to be a packed episode with plenty of analysis and discussion, but that's why we're here. So why not you guys just sit back and relax while we get back to the old grind. My name is Larry Freed.
I'm Sean Capdeville.
And I'm Max.
Yeah, we got names now. So let's get started with the official CinemAttack August movie review extravaganza spectacular. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but I don't know, it sounded better than August movie review special, so let's just roll with it. Let's get started with Kick-Ass 2.
You and me, like Batman and Robin.
Okay, Robin wishes he was me.
Kick-Ass 2, formerly subtitled Balls to the Wall, takes place 2 years after the original Kick-Ass. Dave and Mindy are high schoolers by day, but at night they don their masks to become their alter egos, Kick-Ass and Hit Girl. But now they are no longer alone, as many other civilians were inspired by Hit Girl and Kick-Ass's extreme bravery, and they have become superheroes themselves. Kick-Ass decides to team up with many of these new heroes, but little does he know that there are villainous forces at hand, including Chris D'Amico, previously Red Mist, now re-entitled... Let's call him MF for this review, because kinda want to keep it clean. MF wants revenge on Kick-Ass. Bad. And he's assembled his own team of supervillains to do just that. I personally was a big fan of the original Kick-Ass, not only because it was just a well-made film and it was fun and it was fast-paced, but because it was an interesting twist on the superhero genre as a whole in cinema, and it had a very well-grounded sense of the real world. With all of that said, I was very much so looking forward to Kick-Ass 2, mainly because the trailer made it look to be only bigger, better, bloodier, and of course, ballsier. And when looking at it in that sense, I got a lot of what I wanted out of Kick-Ass 2. Kick-Ass 2 does a great job of recreating the great action that we saw in the first film. Every action scene is full of great camera work, interesting choreography, and pacing that will keep you on the very edge of your seat. And yes, as everyone expected from it, Kick-Ass 2 is chock full of violence. Blood is spewed, guns are shot, chests are stabbed, and balls are chewed. And I'll be the first one to admit, I loved every second of it. And I know that sounds terrible, seeing as you really shouldn't be getting a lot out of this just terrible violence. But to be honest with you, this extreme violence only makes the kills more painstaking and the victories more triumphant. Kick-Ass 2 also wields a very talented cast, with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Chloe Grace Moretz reprising their roles and still owning them. Other characters from the past also return, and it feels like they never left. And plus, even new additions like Jim Carrey's role in the film fit perfectly into the universe and only make the film more enjoyable. Sadly though, there is one bloody stain in an otherwise fantastic cast, and that is the MF, otherwise known as Chris D'Amico, otherwise known as Chris Mintz-Plasse, or Plasse, or however you pronounce that guy's name. Look, I've seen the first film, I know how much trouble this character has gone through, but there is just no excuse for how annoying this character is. Whether he's spitting out-of-date phrases, gratuitous vulgarity, or ridiculous excuses for emotional foil, the dislikability of this character couldn't be any higher. And I don't want to hear any dumb excuses about how he's the villain and he's supposed to be hated, because while that does work in some cases, there's a fine line between a villain who's dislikable and a villain who's dislikable while also being a major utter prick. In fact, the MF is a perfect representation of everything wrong with Kick-Ass 2, all in one character. And sadly, that list is a bit more extensive than it really should be. First of all, listen, I know the film is supposed to be overly violent and overly vulgar. That's kind of how the movie gets its personality, and people have built some expectations. But guys, can't we just have a little bit of subtlety? I know the violence and the vulgarity kind of adds to the style of the film, but there has to be some intelligence in it. The first movie was able to successfully juggle character development and emotion along with violence and vulgarity. Kick-Ass 2, on the other hand, has many scenes of straight-up murder, masturbation, defecation, and one very disgusting and very out-of-place reference to rape. And it's all just thrown around like it's nobody's business. And I know, sometimes it's funny. There are some times in the film where these can be slightly humorous, but other times it can feel sleazy and just in very, very poor taste. The worst part is that Kick-Ass 2 has a serious lack of emotional depth behind it. Now, granted, there are some moments, specifically with Hit Girl, that actually do feel honest and do deserve some attention. But there are other times where some serious stuff happens to these characters. And whatever, they just brush it off like it's just another day in the city for them. Look, you can be dark, you can be gritty, you can say it's the real world and how this isn't a comic book. But when stuff like this happens to your characters, there's gotta be more depth behind it. Most of these situations just go away in a span of 5 to 10 minutes with some pretty rushed and schlocky emotional dialogue. It's honestly a shame that Kick-Ass 2 suffers from all of these problems, because to be very honest with you, not only did I like Kick-Ass 1, but I did enjoy most of my time watching Kick-Ass 2. It was fun, it was fast-paced, it had great action, great cinematography, great camera work, the characters were likable, the acting was good, and the movie's just as creative as it's always been. However, with its overbearing vulgarity, even in the sense of the whole film, its rushed emotional foil, and its dumb, embarrassing comedic moments, Kick-Ass 2 just fails to have the same level of intelligence the first one had, which makes it a slightly disappointing sequel. Simply put, it was bigger, it was bloodier, and it definitely was ballsier. But it just wasn't better. Kick-Ass 2 gets a C+.
Note from the reviewer. As you can probably tell, I'm using a new camera and I don't yet know where to look in order to make it look good. And I'm in a bit of a time crunch though, so I have to film right now. So I'm just gonna have to wear sunglasses for this review. Deal with it. After the tech revolutionary Steve Jobs passed away in October 2011, I knew that a biopic was inevitable. I mean, here's a guy who shaped the fastest growing business sector of the modern age from practically the very beginning. That story has a ridiculous amount of potential, and it obviously needed to be made into a movie. Now the only question is, did Jobs deliver the incredible film that this story and person deserve? No, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Let's take a look.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Now the way I see it, there are 3 ways to look at Jobs, and each way reveals certain pros and cons about the film, so I'm just going to explain those 3 perspectives. The first is as just a straight drama. This is the one where Jobs is the worst, which probably explains the poor reception from critics. The dialogue is pretty weak. Besides a few handful of insightful lines, which I will address later, it's all fairly limp, and though not completely uninteresting, commonly becomes pretty heavy-handed. The characters, besides Jobs himself, which again I'll get to later, aren't given much depth or change. You do see change in a few, like Steve Wozniak, but you aren't taken there, you never get the why. It's also structured awkwardly. The whole movie feels a little rambly and not entirely focused, which is common in biopics, sure, but even so, I shouldn't be legitimately surprised when the credits appear. That shows a lack of resolution and form. So wow, this movie sounds pretty terrible so far, huh? Well, things get better if you look at Jobs as a quasi-documentary of Apple itself. Really, the company becomes a second main character. We see its inception, its ups and downs, and its near death. I mean, it's kind of impossible not to root for Apple, right? Everyone loves Apple, right? No, I don't have a framed piece of Apple stock in my room back home. Why? Shut up. There are a few fun lines sprinkled through the first half of the movie that serve as like the seeds of Apple's philosophy years down the road that I personally really liked. There's also some corporate power grab strategies, etc. that are brief but serviceable, giving us, albeit very basic, understanding of what happened behind the scenes. What's that? You're saying Jobs might not be entirely factually accurate? Oh, look at that! Apple is releasing a brand new product. It's the I don't care. Surprisingly, Jobs' biggest strength comes from what many claimed would be its greatest weakness, Ashton Kutcher. What can I say? He did a great job. Seriously, he impressed me literally the first few seconds he was in the film. He comes out on the stage for a keynote and just the way he held himself and moved was absolutely spot on. As someone who watched all of Steve's keynotes, I can tell Kutcher did his research. Of course, the rest of the film is what matters, and he continued to do well. Whenever I felt like he said or did something unjustified, I immediately realized that the problem was not him but the script, that I couldn't imagine anyone making that particular moment work. I really want to see Kutcher do more drama because he really did do a very good job with this character, showing us who Steve was. Who was that guy? You know that guy, the guy who's all, I am a complete genius and no one understands anything but me and I'm totally gonna make the best thing ever. Yeah, you go ahead and do that. Here's the best thing ever. This leads us to what Jobs is at its best, and that is a character study of Steve Jobs. Being a biopic, this is definitely an important aspect to get right, and Jobs did. It takes an interesting look at who Steve Jobs was, who was, well, kind of a jerk. A genius jerk, but a jerk at many points nonetheless. His dilemma is pretty much when it is and isn't okay to put the idea or the company or something bigger ahead of the people. He clearly makes his choice, firing people that he felt would make an inferior product because they didn't share his vision. He cut out the people that helped him form Apple because they're just not good enough anymore. Then later in the film, the board sees him as harmful to the company, so they kick him out. It's some beautiful irony, and it does raise a question of which side is right, where your priorities should be. I like this aspect of the film quite a bit, and I do think it deserves more credit in this area than it received. So in conclusion, this is how I personally look at Jobs. It's a good character study with a great main performance that, along with a decently interesting look at a company's history, manages to overcome a weak foundation. And I'd call that a solid motion picture. Jobs gets a 6 out of 10.
There's no coming back from this.
A good century and a half into the future, and the world isn't doing too great. Poverty is everywhere, and all of the rich people have already retreated to Elysium, a high-class space station where machines that can cure any disease known to man are dotted all over the map. When an ex-con named Max DaCosta finds himself stricken with radiation poisoning, he devises a plan to infiltrate the space station and get himself cured before he bites the dust. It's no secret that Elysium is pretty heavy-handed with its messages about classicism and the ever-dividing line between the rich and the poor. However, it never gets to the point where you just want to throw your hands up in the air and shout, "I get it, Mr. Blomkamp, I get it!" It's a message as much as it is a backdrop. So while Elysium's big idea is undoubtedly in your face, it's not to the point where it keeps reminding you of its presence every scene. And while we're talking about the events that compose the film's narrative, I feel the need to point out my favorite part of Elysium, its unrestrained reinforcement of its major ideas. From the cinematography to the color correction, every part of Elysium is carefully constructed to convey its themes. I absolutely love this kind of attention to detail, as it uses the film medium's collaborative ideology to its full potential. Nothing in Elysium feels out of place or arbitrarily inserted. Rather, everything is cohesive and has a fully realized purpose, which is a real credit to the filmmakers who put it all together. But even with such a carefully put together film, it wouldn't be enjoyable without a strong cast. Fortunately, I'm happy to report that Elysium is a geyser of talent from pretty much every performer. Special mention goes out to Matt Damon, who plays the character Max DaCosta, who's probably one of my favorite characters to come out of film this year. Much like other successful anti-heroes, he's a monster with a lot of heart, and Mr. Damon does an incredible job delivering that characteristic. Credit must also go to Sharlto Copley, playing the ruthless villain Kruger. It's true that the best villains are the ones that we can see ourselves agreeing with, but sometimes I just want a villain that I can despise, and Kruger delivers on that immensely. In fact, he's honestly my favorite villain in any movie I've seen this year. He's dangerous and extremely disruptive, making Max, the anti-hero, look like a saint in comparison. But for as excellent as the main players of the cast is, it's disheartening to see Jodie Foster's talent underutilized. Miss Foster has proven time and time again that she's a phenomenal actress with incredible range, and while the marketing may tout her as an important part of Elysium's puzzle, she's ultimately just pushed to the side. She has a definite impact on the plot, but nowhere near as substantial as some of the other characters. My other issue with Elysium comes in the form of something that's very spoiler heavy. Of course, I wouldn't give it away, but it left such a strong impression on me that I just had to mention it. It was an event that took place right around the end of the film that made me throw my arms in the air and go, "That's all it took?" Those of you who have seen the film may know exactly what I'm talking about, and I feel that Mr. Blomkamp wrote himself into a corner on this one. I mean, everything else in the film is so tight that it just makes this misstep look more like a forfeit than an act of laziness. Even so, it really threw me off all the same. But even then, that does not hold Elysium back from being an excellent film. It's smart, ruthless, and extremely tight, with an amazing performance from the main cast. And to address the inevitable comparison, I personally enjoyed it a little bit more than District 9, though I feel that I'm in the minority on that one. It's a home run on all fronts and a great reminder that not all blockbusters lack any real intelligence. Elysium scores a 5 out of 5.
And there you have it, 3 awesome reviews from all of us here at CinemAttack. Until next time when we review Ron Howard's Rush, my name is Larry Freed.
I'm John Capdeville.
And I'm still Max.
And we'll catch you guys next time on the first episode of CinemAttack Season 2. See you then.